with VSAC. That's the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation. VSAC has been for over 65 years. We've been helping families plan and pay and prepare for college. I'm really excited to see a big group here tonight. This is exciting, and it's exciting to do it in person, isn't it? Wow. A few housekeeping things tonight, first off, that will help me. I talked to some of you, but I'm just curious. How many folks in the room have a senior? Okay. How many people in the room have a junior? Great. Sophomores? Okay. Freshmen? And anybody younger than that? Okay, awesome, wonderful. That's very helpful. We're going to throw a lot of information at you tonight, but my hope is that you will learn something new. I am positive that you will walk away with more questions, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to share some resources with you so that you feel better prepared. As we go through, when you have questions, if you have a question that pertains to what we're talking about and is not personal to your situation, not applicable to other people, hold the question to the end and I'll be glad to connect with you at the end of the presentation. Otherwise, feel free to raise a hand. If I don't see you, kind of flag me down, use your voice, and I'm happy to address the questions as we go along. I'm really fortunate to be here tonight because as I said, I work for VSAC, and I'm happy to be specifically at Harwood. As the school specialist, I'm part of the Aspirations program here at Harwood, so I get to be here once a week usually. Have any of you heard, the slide's here, have any of you heard of Aspirations? It's been in the news a little bit lately. So Aspirations is a program by VSAC where schools can apply to be a part of. Harwood applied and was selected, and the goal of the project is to work with the school so that all students can graduate with a plan for life after high school. You'll notice that I didn't say a plan to go to college. Aspirations is really about working with students and families to explore all options so that they can find out what works best for them. And so I'm really excited to be here at Harwood. I've been a college counselor for many years and a counselor for more years than that. But it's really fun to work as a consultant here with Harwood. You guys have a really great school and a great team of people that work with your students every day. So with that, I'm going to get started. If you didn't have a chance to do this, you're going to find some really great resources at vsac.org. I'll try and show you a few at the end of the presentation. So one of the keys to success, no matter what grade your student is communication as you navigate this process of life after high school. And it really involves a lot of research and planning, but also really clear expectations from the family and from the student. And when you have all those things going together, you're going to find a great match for life after high school. So what do I mean by this? In the past, I've worked with families who maybe they didn't tell their student up front that the student really had to apply to grandpa's alma mater. It was just expected. Maybe the student wasn't really clear with their parents that, like, Mom and Dad, I gotta get out of Vermont. I really want to go a little further away. So having those heart-to-hearts early on and consistently throughout the process are really important. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to sprinkle in a few tips. And so one of my tips to you guys is if you have a junior, sit down and have a heart-to-heart. Ask those questions. Be upfront about what you as a family can pay for, because when students don't know that, when it's a mystery, it's really confusing for them. And then when they're seniors, I always told my families that they should set up a day and a time once a week to check in for no more than 20 minutes. Because imagine when you're a senior and you're going through this process. You hear so much in the background at school and in the media about life after high school, and then when you come home and your parents are like, let's talk about it, and that happens every day, it's really overwhelming. So I find that if you set up a day like, hey, you know what, Sunday, right before dinner, 20 minutes, we're just going to have a life after high school check-in, and it'll be done until next Sunday. Students tend to really like that. So a little bit since we are talking about financial aid, let's get right down into it. What I have up here is something that hopefully not all of you are completely surprised to see. What we have here is the cost of attendance, also called the COA, at a variety of different institutions. And over in this column, you have what it would cost to attend that institution until you graduate. Ooh, there's some big numbers up there, okay? So when you hear all the talk about college and how expensive it can be, it's true. 1 year at a college, $75,000. University of Vermont is much less expensive at just over $35,000. A Vermont State College is slightly less. Community College of Vermont is significantly less. Any ideas on why? One reason, yeah.
No boarding.
No board, yep. So these numbers include tuition, but also room and board. So what it costs to live there and to eat there. Community College of Vermont does not have the option to live on campus. It's also usually a 2-year degree, and so the price for all years is significantly less. A Vermont trade school is usually around 6 months, and usually does not include room and board either. So the hype about college being expensive, it's true. The cost of attendance is high. But when we're looking at the cost of attendance and what you're actually going to pay, you have to take into consideration what type of aid you're going to get. Most people, I imagine, in this room are going to get some form of grants and scholarship. We call that free money. It's money that you don't have to pay back, okay? And we'll talk more about what grants and scholarships are in a little bit. And so when you subtract that, you get what you need to pay. So let's take a closer look at that. So again, you've got your column for the first year at the most expensive college, but you've got this new term up here, net price. So net price is the cost of attendance minus the gift aid that you might get. So for an average student, you have a much different net price. In a lot of circles, you'll hear this amount referred to as the sticker price. So just like when you go in and you're going to buy a car, there's a sticker price. Most of the time, you don't pay the sticker price when you buy a car. At college, it's the same way. You don't usually pay the sticker price. You'll notice, and it's a little confusing here, right? Because initially we saw that the most expensive college, whoa, significantly more than the University of Vermont. But what happened here when we took in net price?
They got closer together.
They got closer together. So the reason that is because a lot of private colleges that are a lot more expensive have a larger endowment. And they use that endowment to attract students and to make up this difference. So my third big tip for the night is that don't base your search just on sticker price. You're going to be surprised, probably, by what you find. Another reason not to do that is I always encourage students, if you have a school that you think you've done your research, not just, oh, all my friends are applying to Dartmouth and I hear it's really great and so I want to apply to Dartmouth. No, if you've done your research and you know X, Y, and Z reasons why a school is really great for you, but it's really out of your price range, I encourage students to apply. I encourage students to apply to a range of schools, a range of locations, a range of prices, and ultimately, it's going to come down to a decision at the end. You may not get your number one choice. You may not get into your number one choice, but having options is really important. Oh, another thing that I wanted to say about this is that, as I said, these are average prices. The University of Vermont has a program right now called the Catamount Commitment, where tuition is free for students who are Pell eligible, so for families who make, I believe it's less than $50,000 a year. Similarly, Community College of Vermont has an 802 opportunity grant where students can also attend tuition free. So these are averages. Some people are going to pay more. Some people are going to pay less. Just don't close the door and make any assumptions about which category you fall in. Do the research. There are a lot of ways where you can figure out, without guessing, without waiting until your student gets their financial aid letter, how much a college costs. One resource is College Scorecard, which is from the U.S. Department of Education. And through this, you can search a school based on location, you can search a school by major, you can do all kinds of searches. And in the end, it'll even tell you an estimated salary for a graduate in a certain major, which is really going to help your student figure out how much can I afford to borrow if I have to take out loans. Another great resource that's similar to this, how many of you have heard of Naviance? All right. Yay, Aaron, you guys are doing your job well. Yeah, Naviance is a great tool that Harwood has to help families and students explore different colleges and different careers. If you haven't heard of it, you and your student have a password to get in, and it's hours of endless entertainment. You can talk to Aaron or talk to your student's counselor if you don't have that password. Okay, so why are you guys here tonight? Well, your role as the family is you guys have the primary responsibility to pay for education. That's the facts. That's why we're here, right? And that's the communication part. That's where you and your student need to cooperate to make that happen. Together, you also have the responsibility to fill out the forms and to meet all those deadlines. So again, this is where communication comes in. In this process, it's really important to be clear about roles. Who's going to submit the financial aid forms? Who's going to check their email all the time to see what messages they're getting from the different colleges and educational institutions? So this is just a fact. But remember, it doesn't have to mean that you, by financial responsibility, it doesn't mean that you're just writing out a check for the cost of attendance. There's ways to help pay, right? And so for most of you, this is not new information. So there's different types of financial aid. The first type is grants. Grants are great. It's a form of free money. Usually a grant is given because for financial need, usually. The Vermont State Grant is an excellent example of this, and we're going to talk about that one at the end. But there's lots of different sources for grants. Another type of free money, we like free money, we don't have to pay it back, are scholarships. Scholarships are great. They're usually based on a talent or an achievement. You all may work at places where your workplace has scholarships for students. Look into that. A lot of teachers' unions or grocery stores, banks, a lot of different places have scholarships. There's also scholarships here in the area. The Alchemist Foundation is a great resource for students here at Harwood to get a scholarship. So there are scholarships that thousands of people apply to, and there are scholarships that maybe only 10 people apply to. But scholarships can be a great resource. I always tell families, this is my fourth tip, that to plan for the life after high school process, you can't just think about it as, well, once I've submitted my applications for college, then I'm done. You really need to think about the process lasting the whole year, because then that gives you time in your head to budget for the scholarship applications that you need to fill out and you should fill out. So imagine that timeline being a little bit longer than just when you submit the application. Work study. Work study is something that is granted by the financial institution. So students would qualify for work study. And what that means is that at the college or university, they say, you can have a job. We'll pay you to work here. But the student actually has to go to the office of work study, and they have to get the job, and they have to go and do the job, and they have to get their paycheck from the job. And then they have to make a really important decision with that paycheck. Are they going to go out for pizza? Or are they going to go walk over to the bursar's office and pay their tuition bill? So work study is great, but you have to remember it doesn't go directly to pay for that college bill. There's a decision, just like getting our paychecks. We have to decide what we're going to do with them. An important thing that a lot of people don't know about work study is that almost anyone can get a work study job. You just have to ask. You have to go show up at the office of work study on the college campus. You may not be the most glamorous job. You know, you may be working in the cafeteria, you may be a custodian. It may not be what you think you envisioned, but almost anyone can get a job on a college campus. And the last piece of the puzzle to pay for college is loans. Loans are a last resort. Most loans that you get will earn interest while a student is in college. That's called an unsubsidized loan. There are subsidized loans that do not earn interest while the student is in college. But as within 6 months of graduating, those loans start earning interest. So loans are kind of a necessary evil for pretty much most of us. Okay, so this is really our starting point for financial aid. The first step in this process for any of those types of financial aid is you have to fill out the Fafsa. And Fafsa stands for the free application for federal student aid. A couple of years ago, there were some scams going on where there was a Fafsa application on the web and you're going to fill it out and submit your credit card. No, this is the free application for federal student aid. This application takes about 30 minutes to complete. If you don't fill out the FAFSA, I've had a lot of parents say, I didn't fill it out, we're not going to qualify for anything. If you do that, you are saying, nope, I'm totally fine paying that sticker price. $75,000, I'm all in. So fill out your FAFSA. Fill out your FAFSA so that you can get scholarships, so that you have the opportunity to get scholarships, so that you can turn down the loans if you want to, but fill out your FAFSA. Some other applications that go along with applying for financial aid are listed here. I'm going to talk more about most of these. The one thing that I want to say about this one right here, every college is going to have their own financial aid forms that you might have to fill out in addition to the FAFSA. One form is called the Css Profile, and that's usually required mostly by private schools, selected private schools. You do have to pay to complete this form and submit it, and it's much more complicated than the FAFSA, but it is a necessary evil at some schools. So just be aware of that. How are we doing? Questions so far?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So each school will have, you'll fill out a CS with the CSS profile for each school. And when are you filling these out? When you apply, or when you're accepted, or when? What's the time?
Great question. So you'll fill out the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Essentially, you fill it out once, and then you add schools to it. So when you fill out your FAFSA, you fill out all your information, and at one point, you're going to have to list all of the schools that your student is applying to. Okay? Similar with the CSS profile. You are doing that. The FAFSA becomes available on October 1st of every year. So if you're a junior, if you have a junior right now, and you're like, I want to get a head start, let's fill out the FAFSA. No. Fill it out after October 1st, and you're going to fill it out for the year that they're going to school. So if you're a junior, you're filling out the 23-24 version of the FAFSA. Did that answer your question?
It did. I have another question. Yeah. What if the student decides to take a gap year?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you should, I know in my situation, my student didn't exactly know what he was going to do. So we filled out our financial aid forms. We heard back from colleges. Yes, you're accepted, great. And then a few weeks later, we got the financial award information, and we looked at everything, and then we made a decision. You don't have to tell colleges that you're taking a gap year until April 30th, 30 days in September, yeah, until April 30th. And then Usually, if you tell them, yeah, I'm gonna defer, I'll come next year, they'll say that unless something significantly changes about your family's financial aid situation, that financial aid award still stands.
You don't have to pay and fill it out again, or you do?
Every year, you have to fill out the FAFSA. Yep. If you don't fill out the FAFSA sophomore year, you're saying, oh, we're fine with the price this year. No need for aid. You fill it every year. Great question.
But you don't have to do the CSS profile except for once, right? At the
Correct.
beginning?
Okay, so, in order to fill out the FAFSA, one of your handouts on that back table is about creating and using an FSA ID. Your FSA ID is basically your way of signing the FAFSA. The parent, the guardian, needs to have an FSA ID, and the student has to have an FSA ID. And you need to remember them. Do not lose them. Do not share them with anybody else. That's really important. Write down your login information. Yeah.
So if both parents are looking at the information, both parents need an ID?
One
Or
parent.
just one?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And this is something, if you're eager, you could create your FSA ID now. It doesn't take very long, but you know, it's kind of a nice way to get the process going and to get some conversation started and to make it more real. So you can do it now. Just make sure you write down the information and you don't forget it by the time you actually have to submit your FAFSA. This is a great time to talk about email addresses. So for the student who's filling out the FAFSA, they need to use an email besides their school email. Because their school email will go away eventually after they graduate from Harvard. And so they need to have a personal email that they will check. And it also needs to be an appropriate email address. I'm sure that this is an issue for most of you, but some students I've worked with have had very inappropriate email addresses. ilovebeer@gmail.com. Not really something that you want to send to a college. So make sure it's an appropriate email address. All right. So these, we already answered a lot of these questions, which is great, but it is required October 1st, 2022. That's when you can get started. You're filling out the 23-24 version if you are a junior right now. It's really important that you check your college deadlines. Most of the time, the college application deadline and the financial aid application deadline will be close together. Okay? But don't wait until the deadline. With a lot, systems get bogged down right around the due dates. That's one reason you don't want to wait until the deadline to apply to college or to apply for financial aid. And also, another really good reason is that for some resources, not the FAFSA, but some other resources we'll talk about later, resources do run out. And so applying, you don't have to do it on October 1st, but I always said applying by, before Christmas. Fill out your FAFSA before Christmas. And you should feel good about that. And the question always comes up, what if my student doesn't know by Christmas what colleges they're going to apply to? Hopefully they know some. You can always submit it with colleges, and if they don't apply to that college, that's okay. And you can go back and you can add colleges to it and resubmit it again. But just getting that ball rolling with a good list of colleges is a good idea. Questions about this? Something I want to clarify, because I think this is always confusing. When you submit your FAFSA, you're basically submitting it to the government, okay? The government's going to take a look at it. They're going to look at all your financial data. They're going to plug it into their financial algorithm, and they're going to spit out a a student aid report, okay? And they're gonna send that student aid report, also called an SAR, they're gonna send it back to you. So you should receive an email copy. Usually it takes about, they say 3 days, it could take a week. As long as you're doing it online, you should get it within 2 weeks, I would say. And they're also gonna send that same student aid report to every college that you listed on your FAFSA. So the college and you are getting the same information. And the information that's on there is gonna be what's called an EFC, an estimated family contribution. And that's what the big powers that be decide that, we think that, we think you can contribute this much. Most likely you're gonna be blown away and you're gonna be like, how do they think I'm gonna afford this? And we'll take care of that in a minute. So they're gonna give you your EFC. So the colleges are getting that information and you're getting that information. What the colleges do with that is then they take a look at that and they take a look at your child's application and they say, okay, what financial aid package can we give to this family to make this doable? So that's how that, before I got into this, I was always confused about how the FAFSA connected to colleges and connected to me. So that's a little bit of a lay of the land there. Does that make sense? So there's also the Vermont state grant that I mentioned. This is facilitated by VSAC, and it usually we have about $19 to $20 million from the state legislature that we can distribute to Vermont families in the form of the Vermont state grant. Same date, same year that you're going to use. The Vermont grant really varies in size, and it varies year to year, but it also varies on how much money your family makes. Don't assume that you won't get any. I would fill it out. You never know. And then if you have younger children who are going to be going to school at the same time as your older child, your status will change because that's a big factor that they look at, and all financial aid institutions look at, is how many children are going to be in college at the same time. So if your first child didn't qualify for the Vermont grant, but you have a child that's 2 years behind them, apply for the Vermont grant again, and you might get more money.
Do they have to go to school in Vermont for that?
No, actually the Vermont grant does travel to other states, which is a point of contention, but I think it's a good thing. Often, VSAC just released the amount that each student was going to be getting for Vermont State Schools. So that was released in April for the seniors. So what happens is you're not going to know until April exactly how much your Vermont State grant is. Some colleges, particularly Vermont colleges, will list an estimated Vermont State grant amount on your financial aid award letter. It's an estimate because we can't release it until April usually. So just put that little detail in the back of your mind that even if it's listed Vermont State grant X amount, it's an estimate. The way that you apply for this is on VSAC. All of our scholarships require that you have a My VSAC account, and students to apply for the Vermont State grant, you also have to have a My VSAC account. So you're doing two things at the same place. It's like one-stop shopping. Okay,
I have a clarifying question.
yes, please.
It said students fill out on that last slide at the bottom. I'm assuming, obviously, parents are filling these forms out to students, but is it specific about you're doing it in your child's name?
Correct. And the nice thing about the Vermont grant is there's a link to FAFSA, and for most people, this didn't work for me, you can electronically transfer your information from the FAFSA right to the Vermont State grant. So it can be pretty fast. So remember I said that you get that estimated family contribution, right? And so these are the things that they take into consideration when formulating that amount. So your income, your assets, how big is your family, and how many of those family members are gonna be going to college, and the age of the older parent. And yes, it is a starting point. The EFC is a starting point. It's not what you're gonna pay necessarily. My next slide is gonna help you understand that a little better. Okay. So here we have this Johnny. Johnny got into 3 schools, and these are the sticker prices of the 3 schools. Okay? So then Johnny gets this financial aid award letter from each school. And he sees, you guys in the back there, can you see this? He sees in maroon that the expected family contribution, the EFC, is the same at every school. Right? Because remember that came from the powers that be, the government. The expected family contribution is the same. Then, Johnny got his Vermont grant. And what do you notice about that?
It's larger for the more expensive schools.
It's larger for the more expensive schools. Getting it closer within reach. And then on the financial aid package, it listed that Johnny's available, he qualifies for some loans. The loans are basically the same at all 3 schools. And you see how we're getting closer to the price. Whoa, what just happened there?
A lot of aid.
Endowment.
Big endowment at the most expensive school. So they gave Johnny a lot of financial aid here. They gave him a lot here too, but not as much as here. But then, there's a remaining need. So families are expected to cover the expected family contribution, possibly the remaining need. What would be another way to get this covered?
Loan.
Oh, you got, well, yes, you got your loans right here.
Scholarships.
We talked about it earlier.
Grants, scholarships.
Scholarships, yes. So scholarships could help fill this gap right here. But I think it's important to notice that the person that said loans, that's true. I mean, when you think about this, you have to consider, yes, you're covering the expected family contribution. Yes, you're covering the remaining. But you also have to think about, I'm actually, for my kid, we are going to be covering the loan too. So even, I remember when I was applying to college, I was so excited I got my financial aid letter, and I was like, Dad, look, I qualified for some loans. And my dad was like, yeah, of course you qualified for some loans. So it just, I think a lot of times financial institutions or college institutions can make it look not as obvious that you're paying for this. You're definitely paying for this. Yes?
It seems odd to have that blue figured in so early in the game of money when, where do you find these grants? I mean, everybody would say, oh, there's just tons of resources. Where are those resources to fill in that green area? Because if that green area doesn't get filled in, that blue area becomes very big.
Exactly, that's very true. Yes, and when you get your financial aid letter, you have the option to decline your loans, which a lot of students do. They apply for scholarships, or they have a 529, or they have a summer job, or they find ways to pay this, and then maybe it even cuts into the blue a little bit as well. But I do hear you. I am going to talk about scholarships shortly. Some good resources. Great observation, though. Thank you. Questions about this? Yeah.
So when colleges say they meet 100% of your need, that means after the EFC and whatever, that means they meet the need. But like, how do you figure out which colleges meet needs versus, you know what I mean? Like, versus not the full need?
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard term, right? Like, we meet 100% of need. It's like, no, I need more. You're not meeting that need. Yeah. So I guess one way is you really have to do your research. Just like with all of the college process, you really have to do your research. And I think that's important to divide between the guardian and the student. Students don't know as much about this process, and they don't know what it means to be in debt necessarily. Although I will say that Harwood has a great finance class that does help with that. So do your research is number one. Shoot, I had something else I was gonna say about that. Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, I was just asking about the, that when they say 100% need, and how do you figure out, like, I mean, because that, my son's in college, and when they say they've met our need, I laugh, but,
Right. Right. I want to show you a resource at the end
Okay,
that really helps compare this, but I don't want to get off the slide.
Sure, I'm sorry.
No, but please remind me at the end, because it was really valuable to my family. Okay. So, how do you maximize your financial aid? Or did you have your hand up?
Oh, no.
Okay. There's a big thing, do well in school. Of course, we're always telling our kids to do well in school. I also want to encourage students to not be so worried about doing well in school that they don't take a risk. So, for example, I know students who are like, I can't take an AP class or an honors class, or I can't go do that internship. I have to get good grades, otherwise I'm not going to get into that college. That's not necessarily true. Colleges really want to see you trying different things. Most colleges are not looking for a cookie cutter person. They want to see that you got a job or had an internship or volunteered or that you love sports or that you help your grandmother out. Those are important things. So challenge yourself in whatever way motivates you. I think this is also a really big one. Okay, communicate special circumstances to financial aid offices and to VSAC. So with the Vermont State Grant and with the Fafsa, it's just numbers and data, okay? If you have a special situation, especially, we had a lot of this with the pandemic, right? Where families were in very different financial situations than what showed up on paper. Every student that applies to college has a financial aid officer at that school. And they are there to really help you, the good ones are really there to help you figure out how it's gonna work for your family. So call them up, make an appointment and say, tell them what's going on. It's not gonna hurt you. Scholarships, we're gonna get to that one. But not just researching them, you actually have to apply for them, okay? And that's why I mean you have to budget your time so that you can apply for them. Because it's a lot of essays, it's a lot of forms, it's I don't want to say it's a full-time job, but it's a lot. I'll go ahead and tell you. So for scholarships, I know that Harwood has a great listing on Naviance. Do you want to say anything about that, Erin?
Yeah, we use Naviance is a tool that you'll all become even more familiar with as time goes on. It's kind of our organizational hub for the college application process. And it's also the place where we gather information from local organizations like the Rotary, American Legion, the Alchemist Foundation, and some other family organizations. And we list all of those scholarship opportunities, their requirements, many deadline, application materials are all housed in Naviance.
Another great resource is VSAC. VSAC publishes a scholarship booklet in November, and it lists hundreds of scholarships that Vermonters can qualify for. What I have students do is I have them go through the book and basically put a big red X through all the scholarships that they don't qualify for. There will be a lot, because some of them are very specific to where you live, or what you want to study, or different factors. But you will find some that you qualify for. Some of the VSAC scholarships, and it will tell you how many people applied last year. Some of them, we have 36 people apply for, and it's $5,000. Pretty good odds, right? Then you have like the Taco Bell scholarship that has 300,000 people apply to it, and it's $40,000. So you really have to budget your time and figure out, okay, am I gonna do Taco Bell, or am I gonna do VSAC? What are my odds? What else am I working on right now? The scholarship, VSAC awarded over $300,000 in scholarships this March. And as a staff member, I got to be part of the process that selected the winners. It was really gratifying. I've always been on the other side of the desk as a counselor helping students apply, so to see how it worked behind the scenes was really cool. Other ways to reduce your costs. Most colleges like to brag that they have students from all 50 states and around the world. So if you as a family are comfortable and if your student is interested in going a little bit further away, if they are open to going to Alabama or Arkansas, sometimes you can get a good scholarship just by being the one Vermont student at that institution. Canada is also a very good economical option. They have excellent schools. The exchange rate is in our favor, and the base price for a college in Canada is much less than it is here. And there's some schools in Canada that are, closer than if you went to school in the United States. So it doesn't have to be that far away, Mom and Dad. How many of you know about dual enrollment? Okay. You all need to know about dual enrollment. So students in high school, when you're a junior and a senior, you can take 2 free college classes, a total of 2 free college classes while you are a junior or a senior at Harvard, okay? And there's a couple things that does. One, it allows you to explore something you might be interested in. Or maybe there's a certain class at Harvard that you need to take or you don't want to take it with that teacher or whatever. You can take it at a college, and most of the time that class will transfer as college credit. So it can save you a little bit of money, and it can help you figure out maybe what you want to do. Early college, I just talked to a couple people in here whose children are having their senior year of high school at a college in Vermont. So you complete your high school, and that counts, you earn credits towards your first year of college. That is free. You can do that for free. You can't live on campus for free, but that's free. It's an amazing benefit. There are lots of colleges that do it here. CCV, VTC, Vermont Technical College, Community College of Vermont, Norwich. I know that those are popular here. It's definitely something to look into. AP classes. Do you guys do AP here? Yeah. Okay. So an important thing to remember about advanced placement is that each college has their own bar on what score you need to get on the advanced placement test for it to be accepted as college credit. So it's important to do that research and not just assume that you will get college credit wherever you go. I always forget what this stands for. It took me a minute. New England Board of Higher Education. So there are articulation agreements between states. There are some majors in college that are not available in Vermont. If your child wants to study one of those things, they can get in-state tuition in the state that does offer it. So I had a lot of students who thought they wanted to study oceanography. Vermont doesn't offer oceanography, but it's not just oceanography. There's actually quite a few majors that Vermont doesn't offer. So that's worth looking into. There is no shame in transferring, starting at a school that is lower in cost and then transferring. I had a lot of students do that, start out at Community College of Vermont. You guys saw how much cheaper that was in one of the earlier slides. And then transfer to University of Vermont, where all of their credits transfer, no problem. It's a great way to do it. Commute, live at home, and then service. I think that a lot of times we forget about this. 2 amazing service options I'll tell you about real quick. One is Americorps. Anybody heard of it? So Americorps, you serve for usually 1 year. At the end of your year of service, you get a $6,000 educational grant that you can use anywhere in the United States. During that year of service, you can be doing all different kinds of things. You apply for the type of job that you want to do. They pay you a living stipend. It's not much. It's very little. They will not be living in the lap of luxury at all. But you do get that at the end of the term of service, $6,000, which is pretty great. And then there's also Vermont National Guard. So for 2 years of part-time service in the National Guard, you earn 1 year of free tuition. That's at a Vermont State College. So that's pretty awesome as well. So ways to pay, I think your question about loans really touched on this, that I think this is kind of obvious, but it's nice to lay it out this way. So some of us have past income. Maybe we've saved a little bit of money here and there, and we can use that towards student tuition. We have present income. So you could make a payment plan. You can do $100 every month towards that tuition bill. You can use tax credits, and you can apply for scholarships. If these two things don't cover it, that's where we have to look at future income. So a lot of people ask, well, did I shoot myself in the foot by saving for my kid for college? The answer is no. You did the right thing in saving for your kid for college. The formula that they actually use to determine how much what your estimated family contribution is, if you save like $25,000 as a parent, that would, how did they word it? I always get it wrong. Parent assets are considered at a rate of 6 to 8%. So if you save $25,000, it would give you about $1,700 to $2,000 as a financial contribution. So saving does help. They're not going to take all of your savings and expect you to contribute it towards your child's college education. If it's a 529, yes, they will take all of that and consider that for college, but not your personal assets. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah.
So the 529 plan, if you had 2 children, you could put the money into the younger child's plan and it would not be considered for the older child?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure on that.
But it's theirs, it's not.
It's all transferable.
Sorry?
You can use a 529 for any of your kids.
And it's the kids'
So you
assets,
only,
not ours.
like, we have
Correct.
one for all 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so when they do calculate the estimated family contribution, anything in your child's name, even if it's a savings account or a checking account, that's considered at a higher rate than the parent's assets.
So I was told you put it at youngest child's name, so, or just the child that's not going to college.
Yeah, you can. There are limits to federal loans, how much a student can take. There are limits by year, and then there are limits overall. Overall, the most you can borrow is $31,000 in federal loans. And that's important to consider because more and more students are taking time to get through college. So if there's a possibility of a 5th year, you just have to remember that there's a limit to the amount of federal loans that you can borrow. Talking a little bit about student loans, there's lots of options. You really have to do your research on it. We talked a little bit about subsidized versus unsubsidized federal loans. Federal loans will show up on your student's financial aid package. The other types of loans will not, and so you have to do a little bit of research. You'll notice that, the big thing that you have to research is the interest rate and the terms for paying back.
What are the different rates for VSAC? Why are there 6 different rates?
That's a good question, I don't know. Yes.
Did you say certain loans were figured in to the?
The federal loans will show up on your student's financial aid package when you get it. But other loans you have to find yourself.
Maybe you've already mentioned this, I don't know, but divorce couples, how does the financial aid package work for a student with divorced parents? What is that process like?
Yep. It's going to be different for everybody, but I can tell you that in terms of filling out your FAFSA, what you need to do is the parent that the student spends the most time with is the one that is supposed to put their information on the FAFSA. If it's completely 50-50, like to the hour, one way to look at it, I've heard, is that you can look at which parent is the health insurance under. It is important to remember that if there's a step parent, so let's say my son, I'm divorced from my son's father. My son spends more time with me, so I fill out the FAFSA. My new husband, his financial information would be also considered in the FAFSA. Does that make sense?
And then the CSS Profile, which is that other financial aid form required by some colleges, does require both the custodial parent, or the parent that has the student more often, and the non-custodial parent to complete the form.
There's student loans, there's also parent loans. This is another great topic that you as a family should discuss ahead of time about if you will take out loans for your student. So every college is required by law to have what's called a net price calculator on their website. So you can go on to a college that you might be interested in. In their search bar, you can type in net price calculator, and that will pop up. Some of them are really great, and they'll ask you a lot of questions that you as a parent can probably answer. Your student probably can't answer all of them without your help. And it will give you an estimated amount that you might pay for that school. That's really important as you begin this college process. There are some other calculators online that you can use to figure out how much debt you can take on. I always showed my students the debt wizard. That was one that they liked a lot. But these calculators are really a base of your college exploration process. They're really critical. So next steps. I didn't put these out at the beginning because I knew you guys would just look at them the whole time. So this blue handout is a checklist mostly for junior families. There's going to be stuff you see on here and they're going to be, oh my God, I'm a terrible parent. I didn't do this way back in September of junior year. Don't feel that way. We're all doing our best. And probably most of the things on this list, your student may have even done at school. I also have a checklist, planning guide by grade, which starts as early as 7th and 8th grade. Again, don't feel bad if you never did any of this stuff. Some of it is take care of yourself, sleep well, eat, think positive, ask for help. Monitor and encourage your students' academic progress. So a lot of the things that you need to do to help your student prepare, you're already doing them. You're already doing them by being here. Okay, so I'll put these at the back and you can grab these towards the end. VSAC also has a senior checklist on their website, and in this pamphlet right here, there's a beginning to a senior checklist. You can pick this up at the back. This also has an overview, grants, scholarships, and loans. So this is a good base handout. This is a little teaser of what might be on the senior checklist here. Okay, so I'm going to. I'm going to step out of this, and I'm going to go to VSAC and show you a couple of resources that I really like. And I know I work for VSAC, but I actually used these before I started working. So this is the VSAC website. Remember we talked about the Vermont state grant and the scholarships and how students would have to have a My VSAC account. So there it is right there, My VSAC. That's where you would make your account. That's how you apply for scholarships. It's all pretty easy right there. So I like this resource tab. And since most of you here tonight are parents, I'm going to choose parent, but I also want the students to see that there is a tab for students too. There are some fun videos on this site as well. I'll just point out a couple of my favorite guides here. So there's a guide, the financial aid, which you can access. The checklist that I have copied here for tonight if you want an online version. There's also the senior checklist. The scholarship booklet, remember I mentioned those scholarships that get published every November? That's available online. This is the resource that I wanted to show you when we were talking about finding financial need. This is an awesome spreadsheet. Any of you guys like spreadsheets? You are in heaven right now, I can tell you. Okay, so this is something that I used with my students when I was a counselor, and I just used it with my child as well. Super, super helpful. What this does is you can easily compare financial aid awards here. And this is a tool that I've had students actually take to a financial aid office and show them the results on here. And it's resulted in them getting more aid. Let me show you a little bit about how this works. So you would enter in your, let's say you applied to, I don't know, Middlebury, UVM, and Johnson State, Northern Vermont University. And you would enter in, this information should all be on your financial aid award letter. You'll enter in what's the tuition, how much is the cost for your room, how much is the meal plan. They usually estimate how much books are going to cost. And so you're showing all of your expenses here. And it will automatically, let's just enter some numbers here.
Yeah, you're in the one.
Let's say room is $10,000. Let's say meal plan is $5,000. You guys can picture here. Let's say tuition is $22,000. Okay, so then you see it's adding it all up as you go. Then when you get your financial aid award package, you can enter that in. So let's say you found out that you got a $10,000 scholarship at this school, and you found out that you got a federal loan for about $3,000. So then it's going to show you what your total aid was and what your estimated family responsibility is. But wait, it also shows you what percentage the gift aid was of your total cost. So this is what financial aid offices really like to see, and it's what you like to see. If you're applying to two similar schools, if one has a much higher gift aid, if you go to the other school and you say, hey, look, I've applied to Merrimack and I've applied to, Aaron, what would be a good match with Merrimack? Or let's say I applied to Colby and I applied to Bowdoin. And Colby, they're giving me 27%. Bowdoin, you're only giving me 10%. But Bowdoin is my first choice. Can you make up the difference? And I'd really like to come to your school. And it happens quite, if you're doing this process in April and not on April 30th, that difference is gonna happen real fast. So I highly recommend this tool. Are you guys, I know I kind of was.
Where do we find them? Yes. Comparing awards, is that?
Yep. Let me go back to it. So you're on the parent resources, and it's the only spreadsheet on the resources. So all kinds of information on here, finding colleges that fit, for all kinds of information about loans. Another great resource for you will be the financial aid, the forms night. So if you're someone who gets a little bit flustered by filling out financial aid forms and taxes to you are like your idea of a really bad night, You can actually bring your taxes and your financial forms. You can come to a VSAC forms night, and you can start filling things out. And when you have questions, you can raise your hand, and someone much more knowledgeable than me will come around and try and help you answer those questions. So that's a great resource too. I think that's all I wanted to show you on there. But suffice to say, the VSAC website has a lot of really great information. Let's just see. I think I was about done. That's the loan guide. That can be very, very helpful as well. The other thing that you're going to find on the VSAC website is you're going to see a phone number on there. When I was a college counselor and I didn't work at VSAC, I would call that number and just say, I'm really sorry, but I have a student sitting here with me and I have a question. And I gotta say, VSAC was always really helpful in answering my question. So please reach out to VSAC when you have questions. They also we have what's called Fafsa Fridays, where you can make an appointment on Friday, usually between October and February, and you'll get connected with a financial aid counselor who can help answer your questions. And I know when I did it this year, I didn't have the answer immediately for some of my families, but I did some research and I followed up with them within a day. So that can be a really great resource as you're going through this whole process. Please use VSAC, that's why we're here, that's our mission. So. What didn't I touch on? I know I put some of you to sleep with all this talk about finances. I know I've worried a lot of you. What questions or comments do you have?
I have a question. When they give you your financial aid award, and like it includes scholarships, does that transfer for all 4 years? Or-
Yeah, it's a great question to ask. Most colleges, it will. In fact, most colleges now will make a financial commitment about not raising the cost of college each year, or only raising it, you can count, we're only gonna raise it 2%. So yes, it should be, but that's a great question, really important question to ask.
So what if you've determined that, okay, I can give this child this much and we're gonna keep it the same? So in the first 2 years, you've done your financial commitment to your child, the expectation. Is there a way for your child to become independent, like you don't claim them on your taxes, they're now free and clear of your home? How does that all play out?
Yeah, that's extremely difficult to be declared an independent. I've worked with families that have tried to do it, and it's very difficult. But I'm not an expert. I can't really go into detail on that. But you can explore it. Erin, have you had any different experience?
I haven't, because it is so complicated to do, that untangling between parent and child.
Because you're your third child and you've nothing left to give, you've borrowed everything you can, and you just, what do you do?
But I really want to encourage you to think about, I feel like there's a lot more support and a lot more resources, not just for college, but for trade schools, for short-term certifications, for apprenticeships, important jobs that people can make a better than living wage at. And I feel like schools and financial aid systems are doing a better job of supporting students in finding those. And I think pretty much all of us know, like when you try and find a plumber or a carpenter or an electrician, they're impossible to find. So if you have a student who's really good and hands-on, there is no better time to get into the trades. Also with short-term certifications, I was just in a webinar the other day. I mean, there's a lot of different areas, but one thing that came up was early childhood. We're so desperate for early childhood workers. You can go to CCV and get a certificate for free. Like, they will pay for you to get a certificate in early childhood, and you make a commitment to work in a public daycare for 2 years. Done. So there are a lot of creative ways to do things, but you do have to be creative. Right? Unfortunately, especially if you are middle class, you really have to think outside the box. If you're middle class, and if your child isn't an A+ student, you really have to be creative about what you're gonna do after high school and how you're gonna pay for it. I feel that very personally, I can tell you that. But there is a lot of hope. I mean, there's more options than ever in terms of financial aid, and there's more options in terms of different paths after high school. So don't walk away being totally depressed, people. We can do this.
Maybe this is a duplicate of Denise's question. Is that the same? Is it really hard to get in-state residency or another?
I assume that you have residency in Vermont. In-state residency depends on each state establishes that. There are some states where it's really easy. I know a lot of kids who go to Utah for school and they spend 12 months in Utah and they're a resident and it's really affordable. And they're skiing the whole time in powder. So yeah, it depends on the state. Great question. All right. Thank you guys for coming. Please take the information, and if you have other questions, feel free to come up and say hi. Thank you.